Professor McGregor is from Georgia Tech. He created, I think, the most important incubator at Georgia Tech, but also as part of the Icor, NSF Icor program, is the executive director of the South node of Icor. And
we don't see him, Mark. I don't know why.
No, we don't, but I think that is, I may be wrong, but I think that is the square on the top left, but I may be wrong. And if the P, if you see something with a P in a circle, that's
let's see if my audio is working better now. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent.
Hello, everyone.
I think my camera is still not working well.
Mark?
Yes?
Yeah, it's Farid. Encore là, je sais que les séminaires, en fait, les les séminaires qui sont un peu longs sont toujours...
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for staying with us. We thank people who are still with us because we will have very fruitful presentation. I just remind you, we'll have we have exchanged some ideas about the startups and the viability. So we have attended a presentation by Mark about his method. In which we will talk more later. This morning we have got the chance to, and I have got the happiness. I was very happy to see full rooms to talk about finance and the legal framework. So we'll try to give you a summary at the end of the session. It is very important that we keep reminding everyone with the Knesset that we are in a phase that everybody has freedom to talk, and every single reliable and relevant suggestion will be sent to the top management to be assessed and to transfer it to make it a law in order to provide maximum support to our ecosystem and to enable the government to move forward. This afternoon we'll start with Paula, that is the head of the RDB program, that will take some minutes. Then we'll have Peter Meavi, who works in the USPTO. He will tell us a little bit about it. We carry on with Icor. Maybe you have listened about it. Mr. McGregor, who is the head of this body, will give you an explanation about how they do things. And regarding coaching, Professor Badroni, who is Algerian, but he lives in the United States, he will tell us about his life experience, as well as the fact that he started this important initiative, that's to say company coaching. And then we carry on with the Vista method. I will give you more explanation later. Then we will launch the 4 programs that has been defined since yesterday, and you have seen them in the action plan, which is the support. We do not organize a seminar just to do a seminar. We are working and focusing on some accurate programs to cover, to meet the objective set by this seminar. And so we'll see we'll advance and to cover all the points set in the program. So we give you the titles and the names of the Algerian structures and bodies that work vis-a-vis the American ones. We will give you a summary of the workshops at the end of the day and a conclusion from our side and from the American sides as well. So can we start? If you don't mind, Paula, we give you the floor. I'm speaking French because Paula speaks French very good as well. Paula, you have the floor.
Merci à tous, mesdames et messieurs, bonjour.
Much, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon.
C'est un plaisir et grand honneur pour moi de participer à cette conférence.
It is a huge pleasure to participate with you in this conference.
Des États-Unis. Pour ceux qui n'étaient pas là hier, je m'appelle Paula Zinski.
I'm Paula Zinski.
Je suis la conseillère juridique responsable pour les programmes au Maghreb.
I'm the legal counselor in charge of the Maghreb.
Aujourd'hui, je suis très contente de participer à la contribution potentielle des États-Unis.
I've been invited to discuss the potential
nous avons parlé de résultats concrets. Donc là, c'est pendant cette étape que nous espérons avoir de résultats très positifs pour l'écosystème d'innovation en Algérie. Mon collègue Marc Techtier a présenté la méthodologie Vista qui a été développée pour les SLDP. Et aujourd'hui, nous allons présenter trois programmes pilotes qui
going to present a steering program pilots.
y compris,
I'm sorry, the interpreter can't listen well. The internet connection is not good enough.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez bien? Des problèmes?
On a quelques petits soucis, Paula, avec la connexion. Donc, je ne sais pas si c'est de votre côté ou d'une autre, mais on va essayer de régler.
Je suis désolée, vous ne m'entendez pas très bien.
Ça va pour l'instant, ça va. Vous pouvez y aller encore. Pas de problème.
Ça va, d'accord, je suis désolée. Je disais qu'aujourd'hui, on va toucher sur des questions essentielles qui sont liées au développement de ces startups, y compris bien sûr la propriété intellectuelle avec mon cher collègue Peter Maravari du Bureau américain de brevets, aussi les processus de valorisation de la recherche avec le professeur McGregor. Et ensuite, on va parler d'encadrement, coaching de porteurs de projet avec aussi notre cher collègue M. Bedrouni. Et à la fin, on va parler finalement nos collègues du CNES vont présenter les 4 organismes publics algériens qui seront partenaires des États-Unis, du CRDP, pour la mise en œuvre de chacun de ces projets. Donc, au nom du CRDP, du gouvernement des États-Unis, je vous remercie tous encore pour la collaboration. Et je passe la parole à mon collègue Peter s'il n'y a pas d'autres observations. Merci beaucoup et je vous souhaite tous une journée riche de travail. Merci.
Hey, thank you very much, Paula. Peter, you have the floor. It's time for you, Peter.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen.
It's okay.
Looks good.
Yes. Looks good, Peter.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. My name is Pete Maravari. I'm the U.S. government's intellectual property attaché for the Middle East, North Africa. I'll give a quick background on myself, and I'll jump right into sort of today's discussion. I'm an electrical engineer originally, but then went to law school and became a patent attorney. I've spent about 15 years of my career in intellectual property, first covering patents in the private sector as a patent attorney, and then joining the U.S. government and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, where I was a patent examiner, and then for the last few years worked in IP policy. And then I've been the IP attaché for the last 4 years. I'm originally based in Kuwait, and now based in Abu Dhabi, and I've had the great pleasure of visiting Algeria right before COVID, and I'm very excited about this program and looking forward to talking more about this with you. So just a quick background on what the IP attachés do. So the U.S. government has about 13 of us around the world. Our job is to support intellectual property within our regions. We help U.S. companies to do business in the region when it comes to protecting and enforcing their intellectual property rights. But we also play a big role in working with the governments in our region. We often train officials on doing patent examination, doing IP enforcement, so stopping counterfeits at the borders. We help advise on some of the laws to make sure that the IP laws are protecting all the inventors, musicians, and entrepreneurs within the region. It's a fantastic job, and I really love it because it's all about intellectual property, which is my favorite topic. And it's just a quick map where we all are. Again, I cover the Middle East, North Africa, but we have attachés across the world who, again, are there to support the U.S. government's approach on intellectual property. So today's discussion is really just first going over sort of the proposal that CLDP and I sort of had on IP, and then giving the team a quick preview of what that would look like. I was listening to yesterday's discussions about all the incredible entrepreneurs and startups in Algeria, and a lot of discussion was how do we make sure that what we are protecting and want to transfer these IP rights, that there's actually value behind that, and that intellectual property can create jobs. And that's something that is very important when we talk about intellectual property with the U.S. government and looking at the U.S. As sort of a model when it comes to startups, creating intellectual property, and then creating jobs from that. For the group here, something that we can do. So the class that we're proposing to teach will be about what we like to call strategic intellectual property capture. And this is a very specific sort of a skill that we've been working with the past few years. And so why is this type of class important? Well, when we're talking about startups and entrepreneurs, they're creating ideas. But when it comes to the business world, you can't just transfer ideas from one person to another person without there being risk of those ideas being used by someone else without permission, maybe being publicized. And so it's important to take these ideas and create assets from it. So we need to talk about how do you capture those ideas and put them into legal assets, so intellectual property rights. We also know that we don't have unlimited amount of money to protect all of these ideas coming out of all these startups. So it's important to be strategic about which types of intellectual property we capture and protect. And then finally, not all pieces of intellectual property are valuable. And so it's important to have some type of strategic plan of how do we determine which pieces of intellectual property are valuable, which ones do we have enough money to protect, and then how can we transfer those rights to a company or an industry to create and grow jobs. So that's what the class is going to be covering. And here's how the proposal would be. We've done this before, so I'm excited to sort of do it again, but to tailor it to Algeria. And the goal would be to have a small group of officials whose job will be to sort of look at intellectual property and business ideas that are coming into incubators, universities, research institutions, and it's their job to pick not just which companies or startups move forward, but actually which pieces of intellectual property are protected and how they're protected. And so this 40-hour class that we're proposing would be a mix of lectures from myself and a few other experts that we'd want to bring, a lot of very active discussions going over case studies and exercises, using models and examples that we've seen in real life, and doing a lot of these IP capture exercises based on that. So sort of the schedule of sort of topics would be, we would take the new group, go over sort of just a sort of intro to intellectual property, but more importantly from a policy perspective, always asking that question of why are we doing this? Not just a patent protects this, but why is patent protection important to create jobs for this type of startup? We'll then go through all the different types of intellectual property assets, so patents, copyrights, trade secrets, industrial designs, trademarks. We'll then talk more about factors that can change the value or the ability to protect intellectual property when it's coming through a startup or a entrepreneur type of ecosystem. We'll look at filing strategies, and then the most important part, we're really focused on the strategic intellectual property capture. And we'll do both introduction to that, intermediate, and then by the end of the class, we'll do some advanced sort of strategies of how to capture the intellectual property, ways to protect it so it can be used to grow a company. So that's sort of the proposal that we're offering through CLDP from this. So about 40 hours, probably over the course of about 3 months. And we're looking for a group of between about 5 to 10 officials for this program. But for the next about 20 minutes or so, I want to give you a quick preview of what that's going to look like. So first thing that I was hearing a lot about yesterday was the competitive advantages of the startups and businesses that are coming out of Algeria, and what are those competitive advantages? Meaning, why is someone going to pick this Algerian startup or business over this other Algerian startup or business? What makes people choose to either buy the product from one company or use the services from another company. And what that is, that's the competitive advantage. That's why someone will pick you over someone else. And so when we talk about intellectual property and the strategic aspect of what do you protect, our focus is to look at that competitive advantage. What makes your company special? What makes your company valuable? What makes people come to your company versus others? So is it the most advanced product? Maybe you have access to the best customers. Maybe you can source your products from somewhere else that makes it cheaper, and so the cost is less. Maybe it's a different type of software code. Maybe it's just your product looks cool. All these things are competitive advantages that, without being protected, can easily be copied. And if someone copies your competitive advantage, is it really yours anymore? And so what we do in this sort of situation is we take those competitive advantages, those ideas, and we create the assets from it. And so when we talk about normally taking a startup or a business and protecting its intellectual property, really protecting what makes that company or entity special. And so you have these ideas in your head that make your company great, and you take that idea and you put it into an intellectual property asset, a legal, definable asset. So for example, if you have a brand that you're using to identify your company, you would take that brand, you'd register it, create a trademark. Now that trademark has a legal protection. Again, this is sort of the basic idea about taking all these competitive advantages or ideas that make your business special and actually creating legal assets from that. And that's, again, in the form of intellectual property. And again, these types of assets, again, this is just sort of an intro, could be a patent, trademark, copyright, industrial design, trade secrets. And this is sort of what we're doing. We're taking these business ideas, we're creating assets so that this company has legal protection over what makes them special. But again, the point of this proposal is about teaching those individuals who are working with the businesses, the startups, how to be strategic. Because what is valuable? We don't want to spend time and money protecting a legal asset that is not going to be valuable. A legal asset or a piece of intellectual property that is not going to create jobs. Because again, we have a limited amount of money. And so I use this example as a way to think about what's the most valuable competitive advantage of a company. And so in this case, the image I have up here is a picture of an Aston Martin car. It's one of my favorite cars, but it's not the fastest car. Doesn't have the most advanced technology in it. It is definitely not the cheapest car. It is definitely not the most fuel efficient. It has mechanical issues sometimes. It has electrical issues sometimes. But why does this car and this brand Aston Martin have value? Well, the brand Aston Martin has been around for a long time, and it's associated with a standard of quality. Most of the cars are hand-built, so that goes into this standard. When you see that brand, you know it's high quality. You'll get the design of the car, and like, wow, that's a beautiful design. Another thing that makes this car valuable is because early on in the days of the company, they paired this product with the movie series James Bond. And so what they did was they created value in this product by associating it with another product that had value. And again, created more value in its product. So the reason I like this example is because often when we're talking about startups, and even startups looking at advanced technologies, sometimes the advanced technologies that these startups or businesses are using might not be the most valuable or important assets of that company. It could be the team that is able to create new advanced technology every year to make sure that their customers are always have the best products in the market. Or maybe it's the way that this company has designed that technical product. And so it's a really simple question of, is that technology valuable, or is it something more? And so when we're being strategic about selecting what types of intellectual property we're going to protect, I like this example because it's an easy way to show we need to think more than just let's protect the technology behind it, let's go get a patent, but we need to be strategic about what we're spending our time and money protecting. The other example I like to use is this one, the yellow house. So often when I've been in the region, I'll go to a university or go to a research institution, and they'll say, hey, Pete, we have 8 patents that we've got, and we're really excited, but we're not sure why people aren't coming to license them. Why aren't they coming to buy our patents? And this was brought up yesterday, that we need to make sure that when we're creating intellectual property rights and we want to transfer technology, there must be value behind that. There must be a market for that technology. And it's tough when we're protecting intellectual property that has no market, because then it's hard to go find a market if there's not a market to begin with. And so this is the example I like to use to kind of showcase this, where maybe a person just loves the color yellow, and they go and they build a house that's all yellow on the outside, all yellow on the inside, and they're really excited by it, and they've spent a lot of money. Well, it turns out that they have to move someplace else, and they have to end up selling their yellow house. Well, how difficult do you think it is going to be to sell this crazy yellow house? Difficult. Many people do not want a yellow house. It has a very small market. Maybe there's 3 people in the entire world that would want to live in a house this yellow. So that makes it very difficult for that person to transfer that property right to someone else, or to sell that property right to someone else. Versus had that person wanted to build a house with a large market, maybe not a yellow house, it'd be much easier to transfer that right to someone else or to sell it. Again, it's not to say that there's not value in this house for that person, or value in that house for maybe that community. But if we're looking to have this sort of understanding that if we're going to protect, invest in these companies and startups and intellectual property, that of course there'll be some place to transfer this technology or sell the technology or sell the business. We need to make sure that when we're creating that IP right initially, that we're thinking about that. So that's when we start to talk to this whole idea about strategic IP capture, which will be the essence of this proposed program. So what is the goal of strategic IP capture? Well, the primary goal is to create not just an intellectual property right, but a usable one. One that we can actually license or sell, or we actually use the right, but also while saving as much money as possible. And so the difference between sort of IP capture generally, which is where it's going to get as much intellectual property rights as possible, is that this sort of approach, we're only going to look for the usable ones. So for example, if we're going to go protect a let's say technology, but that technology, it has no market. So is it really a usable intellectual property asset if we get it? Potentially, but we need to talk about why it's usable. Also, sometimes the cost of a piece of intellectual property can be expensive. Often, sometimes getting a patent can be $10,000 to $20,000 US just to get the patent registered. Well, maybe the value of that IP asset is only $5,000 US. So then is it actually worth all that money to protect it? But sometimes, the brand, for example, say the trademark, it only costs between sometimes $300 to $500 US to register in the US. But that brand, for example, let's say for the US company Apple, that brand is probably worth millions, if not billions of dollars in value. So there is a cost difference between the value of getting that protection and the value of the actual protection once it's done. And then finally, and another important sort of topic is, if you have this piece of intellectual property, what's the cost to use it? So for example, if someone invents a new way to make computer chips, and it's going to cost $1 billion to actually make that technology, put it into use in order to make sort of computer chips from that. Well, what's the best way for us to protect that? Should we spend all this money to protect those, sort of that invention or those ideas, but we won't ever have a chance to use it ourselves, meaning we'll have to go and license it to someone else? These are questions that we'll talk about during this exercise. And so how do we do strategic IP capture? There are three key steps. Step one is we identify every single piece of intellectual property that exists. So what we'll do during the class and what we've done in real life is we'll take a big company or an entity, and we'll sit down and we'll list every single piece of intellectual property we can find, or every single competitive advantage that exists. Once we identify every single piece, then we can prioritize what is the most important intellectual property. Because if we can't identify everything, we can't prioritize it. And once we prioritize, say, the top three most important pieces of intellectual property to that company, so the top three things that make that company competitive against other people, and if those competitive advantages are lost, that company will fail. We'll then protect those with the highest amount of protection. And then for intellectual property that is less important, maybe we do a very basic form of protection. And if it's not important at all, then we won't worry about it. So that's the three key steps that we'll talk about during this class. And so I'm going to go through very quickly the three steps. So step one is we first identify all the intellectual property. Again, why you can't prioritize and protect what you don't know. And I see this often. I see often a company will come to us and say, hey, Pete, we have this new business, and it's really based around this one technology. And I'll say, that's great. Well, what about everything else? They'll be like, oh, no, this is the only thing that's important. And then I'll be like, well, you guys have a brand. You have the name of your company. You have the software code that's going into this system. You have a graphical user interface and a mobile app that is connected for this technology to work. And you have all of the databases of all the information and the people that you have connected to make this thing happen. So you have all these different things that you as the company have invested in. And I want to make sure that we identify every single one of those competitive advantages, and then we list them out. We're not going to protect every single one, but we do want to make sure that we list them all out. So we make sure we get a full disclosure. We'll talk about how we do that. We'll then identify every single piece of intellectual property. We'll assign which types of registerable intellectual property protections might correspond to that competitive advantage or that piece of intellectual property. So intellectual property protections such as a patent, trademark, or copyright. We also have trade secrets, which we can't register. And also public information might be a competitive advantage that we least want to track, or even the people that on our team are the competitive advantage. While we can't protect those using traditional forms of intellectual property, it is a competitive advantage. We want to make sure that we list it as an asset for this company. So that's step one. So this is sort of what it looks like. So I took an example that we've used before. This is a app in Bahrain that is able to take a sort of a football pitch and to put it online, and so that if you want to go play football during this time, this location, this app will tell you which fields are empty, which ones have room for you to come join. And so this was a sort of a good example I want to use just for today's case. And this is what we'll do. We'll take this business idea, and then we'll do step one, identify all the pieces of intellectual property. So I know it's quite small, but it's here. So I've listed every single piece of intellectual property that the team and I identified, and we listed what type of intellectual property protection it would get. So it's all listed. We're looking at different things that could be, so different inventions, different processes, different brands, different logos, the color even, and then the computer code. All different pieces of intellectual property. So we've identified everything. Step two, once we've identified it, we then prioritize. So which pieces of intellectual property are the most important? And why? Because again, resources and money are limited. And also it's difficult to sometimes protect everything. So these are sort of the 9 different factors that I like to use when we look at, is this piece of intellectual property important for this company? So through this class, we're going to go through each of these in detail. But some of the most important ones include, what's the cost if this competitive advantage or intellectual property is lost? And how much will it take to regain that competitive advantage? We'll look at, is this piece of intellectual property easily reverse engineered. So if it's easily reverse engineered, you might need one type of IP protection versus another. We'll then also look at what's the cost to protect this piece of intellectual property? How long will it take to get intellectual property? And even for examples of, if we're looking to protect it in this location, can we even enforce those rights? So we'll go through all those different sort of thought processes as we strategize what type of intellectual property we're going to protect. And what does that look like? So here's, again, similar, just again, the chart that we'll be creating through this class of many different case studies. So we've listed all the pieces of intellectual property. We've then identified how would you protect it. And then the third column here is the priority. So we've listed, well, the first one could be medium because the logo helps identify the brand. It's also cheap to get. We've looked at, and there's 3 logos. 2 logos we said were medium. 1 logo we said is high. So we're looking at every single piece of intellectual property. We're also looking at the processes, the technology behind it. We're doing searches to see what else is out there. Maybe the technology is very similar to something else, so maybe the value of the technology itself might not be as high as, say, the logo or the brand behind that. So that's some of the things that we're going to look at. So once we prioritize, we now have intellectual property that is, let's say, high priority, medium priority, or low priority. And then what do? We then protect it, of course. So for tier 1, high importance intellectual property, the team and I will then talk about what are some ways to put the most important intellectual property through as much protection as possible. Different ways to protect one piece of intellectual property are possible. You can protect something with a copyright, sometimes with a patent, and design depending on different features of that invention or that technology. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about how do you protect the medium importance and the low importance IP. We'll go through all these different tiers and go through this sort of strategy many times. We also want to look at, this is not just a one-time thing, because we know that technology changes, we know that markets change, and part of this process that we'll be talking about is how often do you redo this strategy? How often do you take a look at that startup, that company, and say, let's do IP capture again, because maybe things have changed. So once we've done that, we've now decided which piece of intellectual property we're going to protect, and then we go in and protect it. And once we do that, then we can leverage those assets. We can use the intellectual property. We can use these legal property rights to potentially seek financing. We can sell those rights. We can license them, promote them, and enforce them. But you can't do any of that until you actually take these ideas, create assets, but not just all the assets, the strategic assets. And and through this process of strategic IP capture, you know why you are investing money and resources into each piece of intellectual property you're going to protect. So if someone asks you, hey, Pete, why did you get a patent on this? Through this process of strategic IP capture, you can clearly say, well, look, these were the 10 different pieces of competitive advantage that we identified for this company. We prioritized these 2 because they were the most important, because if they got lost, the company would fail and the jobs wouldn't be able to be created. And because those were the 2 most important, we got patents not just in Algeria, but also in these 4 other markets. And we also got a trademark on our brand as well. And so you have clear reasoning why you're getting these rights versus in many cases that we see, again, someone comes to me and says, hey, Pete, we just got a patent on this technology. Isn't that great? And I say, that's fantastic, but why? And they look at me and they say, well, we want to get a patent. And I say, I love patents. That's fantastic. But why did you decide to get a patent on this technology? And then we had that conversation. So, but with this process, the strategic IP capture, those people could have answered that question very quickly because there was a strategy behind why we got those rights. And in this class, that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about how do you create a strategic IP capture plan. We'll know how do you start that plan and how to stop. We'll go through and talk about all the different types of intellectual property policies and strategies and reasoning, why you're going to protect this competitive advantage, why this competitive advantage has value, where that competitive advantage has value, and how to protect it. So that's sort of the proposal that I want to bring to you today. And maybe I'll pause for any initial questions, but maybe I'll turn it back over to Paula and CLDP as well. So thank you so much.
It's a relevant presentation. Just about the question, we prefer to continue with the other presentation if you can stay online. The two other presentations, and after we will check with the audience if there is some question for you. Okay? Is it possible for you to stay with us?
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
No problem.
Okay, wonderful. Please, Professor McGregor, it's for you right now. We are waiting your presentation, and I just inform you that you have 40 minutes for this presentation. Professor, are you connected? Maybe there is a problem. We will maybe so ask the audience for a question for Peter, if it's possible, just to wait and to fix the problem with Professor McGregor. So I will start it just to check with the audience who want to ask you something about the IP program. S'il vous plaît, donc pour vous, là,
The floor is open for the question, waiting for the waiting for internet issues, Mr. Peter. So please, you can speak French. Use translation.
Les posés ou qui n'ont pas été exprimés dans la présentation. Non, non, personne. Si.
So there is a question, I guess. So this morning we tackled the problem of valorizing of patents and licenses. I'd like to know in the United States how those things are done in comparison to patents and licenses, and how could we make an analogy to that in Algeria? So do we have a method that we could valorize, that could allow us to valorize the patents and also include them in the assets of the company? Because earlier we tackled the problem related to solutions which are intangible assets in the company and which are not valorized.
Thanks for the question. That's such an important question. So the difference between what we'll be doing with this class and sort of the more traditional patent valuation, which is sort of, there are definitely many methods that we've done in terms of the cost of creating that technology, the size of the market. What this sort of method does is it takes a step back. And it's not what's the value of this technology to the market. It's the comparison of every single piece of intellectual property for that company and figuring out what is the most valuable for that company to succeed. So, for example, you mentioned for what's the value of a patent that a company gets. Well, in many cases, that patent may be, let's say, at value of $100,000 US. And that value is determined through, let's say, the recovery process, where people look at, if this patent is lost, how much extra R&D is going to take to get that competitive advantage back. Well, it's good, but what happens if maybe the design of that technology is actually more valuable? For example, when you look at the design of, say, the Apple iPhone, one of the highest U.S. IP infringement cases was between Apple and Samsung on their phones. And it wasn't the technology in the phone, it was the industrial design, the shape of the phone. And that damages of the initial case was over $1 billion US. And the reason I mention this is because if, for example, Apple had only protected, let's say, the camera inside the phone, or the way that the wireless communication works, and they did not protect the design, they would be missing out on a large piece of what makes their phone valuable. And so by doing strategic IP capture, we're not just trying to value each piece, we want to make sure that we're protecting what actually is the most valuable assets to that company. And so that's sort of what we're going to cover in this. And it's actually a fairly simpler thing to do than doing all these economic analyses of markets of different places. It's more focused on the intellectual property, the competitive advantage, as opposed to the market value. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So now everything is okay normally for Professor McGregor? Oh, thanks.
Yeah, en principe, oui. So go ahead. Yeah, you should be okay.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, that's okay. Everything is okay. We hear you. Can you share your presentation, please?
I'll be glad to. And how much time do I have to make
40 minutes.
No, but he needs a tiny bit more time because we need to skip to the original schedule where we had more time than 40 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. I will share my screen and share my presentation. Please do let me know if you are able to see my screen. Let's see. You're able to see that?
It's okay.
Can you see my screen?
We see your screen. It's okay. You can go on.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be here today. Thanks very kindly to the organizers for this kind invitation. I want to talk about how to ensure the success of researcher-based advanced technology startups, and I want to in particular talk about the Innovation Core program that we use in the U.S. I'm Keith McGregor. I'm a professor of the practice at Georgia Tech. I teach artificial intelligence and entrepreneurship at Georgia Tech. I'm also the director of Georgia Tech's incubator for faculty startups. In my group in Venture Lab at Georgia Tech, we are shepherding more than 400 startups at present. And I'm also the executive director of the National Science Foundation's Icor South. And I will get right into it, if you please. I would like to tell you a little bit about Icor at first, and then I would like to get into the methodology and then make a proposal for a pilot. And I don't need to tell you that our universities are the source of quite a lot of advances in technology. And over time, the idea might arise that we get that core idea or that core technology. What could we do with it to improve the human condition, to get things out into the world? So we may seek a vehicle for deploying that technology in something other than a research sort of vein, and rather to think about it going out and being deployed perhaps in a product or in a startup. And this is quite a common occurrence now in the U.S., although I will say that clearly not everything that we do in a research laboratory gets translated out into the world. But nonetheless, very many people are taking this approach now, and we certainly are very vibrant with it at my university. The primary issue is that we think that there's this progression that allows you to go in something of a straight line to a company. And what I would like to do is talk about the Icor program and why that isn't necessarily so. The Icor program Icor stands for Innovation Core Program. It was started by the National Science Foundation, and this began perhaps about a decade ago. What it is generally about is teaching entrepreneurship, teaching the scientists and the researchers across the nation how to translate their technology out and into the world. And we teach this in person very frequently, as well as now virtually. We conducted many variations of virtual presentations or virtual teaching cohorts across the world, actually, given that we are all able to be in our little boxes as we are today. But the Innovation Core program is more than just being about teaching entrepreneurship. It is also about the commercialization of the entrepreneurship. And so what I like to suggest is that it is indeed a systematic creation of entrepreneurially minded researchers and research-based startups. Why would this be important to us? Well, the first is that if we have researchers that are entrepreneurially minded, then they would be the ones who, at the moment that they realize that their invention or their research could become an innovation, they would start the actions of translating it into those innovations rather than waiting for someone else in a different organization to initiate that process, to find, if you will. But another reason why we're interested in this action as a goal for Icor is that we believe that once someone who is a researcher understands that it is possible to translate their into some innovation and potentially into a startup, this creates within them a movement of how they see themselves and how they see their students and how they and their future students, their future graduate students. And this results in a lifetime of the creation of startups, generational effect, and it inspires their colleagues to act in a similar manner, to care for their students and assist them in their careers going forward. We certainly want to create research-based startups. These startups, in our experience, are the ones that create very good jobs. The products and services that we generally use today, Google is a great example. These things originated with some research funding at the university, and they've gone on to become very large companies. The other part of job creation that goes hand in hand with research-based startups is that these are, because they create those good jobs, they also will improve and increase the economies at a local, a regional, and a national level. And of course, when a startup begins to happen in an area, our experience is that other startups begin as well, because founders become inspired by other founders. So these are the reasons why the Innovation Program was created by the National Science Foundation of the United States to inspire researchers to think entrepreneurially and to instigate research-based startups. How we do this is the subject of my next topic, and so I'd like to tell you about what it is that we do and why we do it. So I mentioned before that we think of creating a business, and I myself, I have been an entrepreneur for the last 40 years. I've been an entrepreneur almost as long as I've been working in the field of AI. And I've created many companies. And I presently have the responsibility of helping Georgia Tech and the National Science Foundation create companies from research. The idea that one might have is that it is a straight path to go from an idea into an eventual company. But consider how it is we were doing things in the past. One of the formulas that you tend to see is that if you have an idea, then the first thing you should do is make something. And while you're in the process of making something, you should write a business plan. And you should possibly create some financial statements, in particular, maybe a 5-year forecast on how things will go and how the economics will be. Unfortunately, and probably surprising to you, is that this plan never really works the way it seems. It is not as straightforward. And And those of us who have been creating companies for a long, long time realize this, and we've known it all along. It's just simply that we haven't been teaching it necessarily in this fashion. And so one of the ideas behind the motive for the National Science Foundation was to change how it is that we do this instruction by talking about the mythology. And so it is a myth that it is a straight line. And in fact, it is also a myth that you need a business plan and you need a 5-year forecast. We actually know for certain, anyone who's ever written one, and most people who've read them, know that every business plan is fictional. It is a story of how things may work out, but it is not a prediction of how things will work out. And anyone that thinks that they can make a forecast that's 5 out is simply thinking magically. All of us across the world have just endured and continue to endure an 18-month or 20-month long lesson in how all of our careful planning can be thrown aside by things out of our control. And so this idea originally of how we taught in all of the business schools and everywhere else, how to create a startup, finding a business plan, making forecast, is simply not the prescription that is necessary. And that brings me to the innovations that are at the core of Icor itself. And I want to speak on 4 of them. The very first change in it starts at the beginning, and it is by being focused on or centric on the customer itself. This originates with a well-known in the U.S. entrepreneur, Steve Blank. Steve Blank was teaching courses at Stanford and Berkeley in entrepreneurship. And in doing so, he realized that the old way of doing it, the one I just outlined, was not actually sufficiently reducing the risk that startup would be encountering, and therefore the startups generally were not attracting the kind of subsequent investment that would be necessary to propel them along. So Steve Blank developed an idea that he calls customer development, a staged process by which you move from discovering who the customer is and then validating that discovery into more of a company phase and creating customers and then growing the company by growing customers. This focus on the customer also migrated to one of Steve Blank's students, Eric Ries, who is the father of the lean startup movement. He was in one of Steve Blank's classes at Stanford, and he also took this idea, this approach, and borrowing from techniques of lean engineering and just-in-time management, he developed the lean startup methodology for product development. And this is the approach that is at the core of Icor, where instead of racing to build something immediately and finding out if somebody might want it after you built it, the principle is to gradually build something, gradually build the business, and gradually build the process, and test the building of this gradual effort over time with the customers that are out there by gathering evidence on what we do and don't want. Motivating this and motivating Steve Blank was the principle that most people who build things, most people who code or make things, are actually, to just be blunt about it, are in love with what they make. And it's very difficult for them to see the flaws in it, and it is extraordinarily difficult for them to accept that they may have made something that someone else does not care for. The late physicist Richard Feynman actually codified something that's at our core, which is the first principle is you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. So it does not matter how smart you are, how great of a researcher you are, and how many times you might be published in very renowned journals. If your theory of how the world works is different than the fact of how the world does indeed work, you have to change your theory. And so we have possessed ourselves with a theory of startups that they actually do proceed in this straight line manner. We've thought this way for 100 years, and led us to believe that a startup is a smaller version of a large company, or a baby company, if you will. And the only thing one would have to do is to wait a while, do some work, add some cash to the process, and then things would work out. But we now know this is the central problem, that it is not a smaller version of a large company, because a startup doesn't have something, the crucial something that a company does have. So startups actually take an entirely different tact from a business development point of view. Startups have to search for a missing piece. Companies execute it. And so the straight path that was our theory about how startups work actually is not a straight path at all. It's something of a drunkard's walk toward an eventual company. And this leads to the second innovation at the core of Icor, which was tracking how business knowledge develops over time. In 2010, Alex Osterwalder finished his thesis in business and developed the business model canvas. This one encapsulation of how a business operates was revolutionary, and Steve Blank in 2010 introduced it into his class. This seemingly simple one-page description, and it is indeed one page, actually is a complicated connection of the parts of a business and how each one interlocks and interacts with each of the others. We use this in Icor to track that progression from the very first day all the way through to perhaps the eventual level at a company. So in a way, this allows us to create a laboratory notebook of how a business evolves over time and is developed based on the arrival of knowledge over time. Another way of thinking about this is, in our way of thinking in Icor, when you are a startup, you are working on your business model. But then when you become a company and you begin to execute the business model, you then are able to produce the products or deliver the services that customers need. Speaking of customers, the third innovation of Icor is how we actually go about finding out the customer. We want this to happen. We want to eventually arrive at a company. But very, very often, in fact, more often than you might imagine, it doesn't work out. You make something despite your best efforts, and there is nobody there because perhaps you make something that nobody cares about. I have done this, and many people do this. And this is not because you can't code or you can't build something. In fact, we like to say a startup doesn't fail because they fail to make something. They fail because they cannot make something that someone wants to buy from them. And so this puts the onus back onto the customer. You cannot simply rely on your technology to cause a customer to materialize. Indeed, in Icor, when we're teaching it, one of the things that we say is to anyone that's in our class, we say, you are already the expert in the technology. What you must do now is become an expert in the customer. And so finding this customer out in the world really means asking ourselves, what jobs are they trying to do? Among many possible jobs that they might be trying to do at one moment, which one of those is the most important to them? And are they content or are they dissatisfied with how well they're doing on that job? If they measure their success at doing a job, could we come up with perhaps a set of requirements as well as the pains and the gains associated with trying to do a job and succeed, and consider all of the other characteristics of why one is doing a particular job, and understand the customer better. And if we take this stance, we can begin to view the product or the service that we're going to offer in this light. A customer will hire your company, the new company being built, to do the job for them. How would you measure success? So we can build backwards from understanding the customer. So this is why we use the technique for customer discovery, so that we can understand what it takes to succeed when that customer hires our product or service to do that job for them. We do this by asking our teams and our cohorts to go out and talk to a great many people, hundreds of people. And we like to say this is all about talking to humans. It's really about listening to humans. What are their needs? What are they trying to get done in their lives? And can we take what we know how to do from our work in the laboratories and translate that into something that rises to meet and that need and satisfy that important job for them? Now, happily, for all of the researchers out here, we actually do use science here. We actually discover that we can apply the scientific method to helping us do that. And this is something that is very surprising to most of the researchers that come into our program. But they are very well trained, and you are possibly very well trained at understanding the scientific method. We actually do employ it directly. It's just that we do not employ it in the laboratory. We employ it as a technique for listening to customers in the world. The innovation is just to how it evolves. Startups search and companies execute. And this question of searching really begs the idea of what do we search for? We actually want to see how the business will fit into the world when it gets there. And so we approach this in a staged fashion. We first begin with problem-solution fit. Is there a problem or need people care about? And can your technology become a solution that will meet that need? If this is true, then we can progress to something that is more typically taught in business school, which is product market fit. Do we have sufficient evidence that the solution satisfies the customer's problem? If so, we ask ourselves, can we build and deploy a product or service that satisfies it? This is the very first step towards actually making a company go. And then lastly and finally, we ask ourselves, what about the business fit in general? How do all the economics, the model, the desirability, the feasibility, and the viability come together to allow for a business that is repeatable and scalable? So we say in Innovation Core that a startup is a temporary time, a temporary organization that's built to search for that business model. And that is what we teach in Icor. That's the methodology of the Innovation Core program and why it is so strong. I should like to switch gears momentarily now and make a proposal. And this is a proposal for a pilot to begin to conduct Icor in your country. My group, Icor South, has trained a lot of teams to teach this. We are probably one of the most prolific set of instructors on the planet with respect to this. We've trained more than 2,000 startups how to conduct themselves in this manner. But more than that, we have also trained almost 1,000 instructors on how to teach this methodology. And so we should like to propose that the way to get started with an Icor-like program is to train instructors. And we would propose to do so. So we propose a pilot program to train Algerian Icor instructors. We have been very practiced at this and done this training internationally. Pardon me. We just 2 weeks ago finished a second training program for the country of Ireland on this. And what we propose is the following scenario. We would propose quite soon to construct an instructor academy for Algerian Icor, where we start in December with a mini workshop preamble, if you will, for the instructors. But then in January, we would offer the ability for those instructors in training to observe the National Science Foundation's national level cohort for teaching researchers that are funded by the NSF. I will be the lead instructor at that cohort, and you would be welcome as my guest to observe it and debrief with us on what you might have observed. And then sometime in the springtime, we would conduct an intensive 3-day workshop to go over the techniques and the manner in which Icor is indeed taught, and ensure that you are very well trained in the actions of teaching this approach. And we will teach this virtually. I'll stop my presentation now, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you so much for your relevant presentation. I think that you said a lot of things, and we will do our best to be with you in the same way, just to have the good result that we expected during your proposal program. Just check if there is some question for you. Vous avez des questions ou... Ah, ok. As you like. Français ou anglais, pas de problème.
Bonjour. Good morning. Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. I have a short question. You wanted to train Algerian trainers, but do you think that your method can be adopted to the Algerian context? And also, are you aware about the legislation of the Algerian legislation? And thank you.
I will take the question in reverse order. I am not as facile with the nuances in Algeria as I am in other places. However, I am very confident that the technology and the methodology can be adapted. It is absolutely our intent to not try to convey something that works in Silicon Valley, USA, into something that might work at any country, including yours. And so we spend a lot of time in preparation, understanding the nuances and making the adaptations. I'm convinced, having taught it in Europe frequently, in China, and in Latin America, that this process is readily adaptable, and that the principle actually is at the heart of the way businesses have been built over all of the centuries. A focus on the customer is actually what has caused all small businesses that I'm aware of to begin in the first place. And so this is just simply taking something that we as humans have used for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and applying it to advanced technology startups. And I confess that, to my own surprise, that this indeed works as well as it does, but I have seen it work thousands of times. I'm confident it will. Are there any other questions?
We can't hear her. We can't hear her. When we use lean startup with our incubators combined with IMC method, so and it is the most concrete and most efficient method. But what we have noticed first, we have to identify the customer, because it is an approach that target the customer. Should imply we should first start with the market study and target the customers. What we see in our startups in Algeria, that this work requires a lot of knowledge and methods, and especially market study, and for them is a little bit a load for them. And generally they are IT engineers and engineers, and going to market study, that is not their main job. That's to say, it is a huge job, and we have to focus on, and they are struggling with that, or to do it as it should be. I would like to have your opinion about the position and segmentation of the customer, and thank you very much once again.
This is an excellent question and a very frequent one. And actually one that I held myself. It is very difficult to imagine that we might ask a scientist or an engineer to go out and talk to someone in the world themselves. Nonetheless, it turns out that the scientist and the engineer tend to be able to understand the applicability of what they've worked on to other domains than the one they presently have been doing the research within. And so we do indeed ask them to step away from the things that they are comfortable with and go and have these conversations. And they are indeed challenged by market studies and things like conducting that, deciding who to talk to. We, in the construction of our program, tend to pair teams of scientists with a mentor of some sort who can act as a guide, act as a sounding board for opinion, to assist them in finding people to speak to. And this has worked rather well for us. I will tell you that this technique is the one that we deploy at Georgia Tech, and that my colleagues across the U.S. at the very largest research institutions in the U.S. This is the technique we use for startup creation now.
Thank you. Dernière question, s'il vous plaît. Juste une dernière.
The last question, please.
Presents myself. So it's Dr. Jabir Mohammed Amin, senior researcher from the Research Center in Industrial Technologies. We should thank you first for your presentation. We are very interested in the training that you presented. We are wondering how we can be part of this training, and what are the conditions to do it. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that question. We will be working with, I'll be working through Mr. Chatel to answer this particular aspect and to set the qualifications. But I will say that it is very likely that you already have the ability to do this. And I will extend to you the idea that the hardest part of being an instructor in Icor has to do with adopting a policy of being a coach and not being a consultant. Imagine being a soccer coach. A soccer coach does not play in the game. A soccer coach is only on the sideline, but a soccer coach works very hard in practice. And this is what this is the mentality that we strive to create within an instructor, to be a coach and not to be a consultant. And that is, but that we will discuss, and we will send to you the necessary requirements. I do hope you entertain this pilot proposal.
So thank you so much, Professor. We know that your time is very precious, and you help us just to understand how to manage a startup in Algeria, and maybe for the training, we will share it with CLDP and find a good solution to involve all the parties that they are interested about your formation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next presentation, Sibdruni. It's your time.
Yes. Thank you, Simon. Can you hear me?
That's okay. We hear you.
Very good. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Azul and bonjour et bonsoir parce qu'il est presque 8 heures du matin ici à San Diego.
I'm here in San Diego.
So I'm going to share my presentation.
I'm going to speak English.
Can you see it?
We can see it.
It's okay.
Okay, très bien. All right. How much time do I have?
As you like, 14 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to try to be brief and to the point because I'm sure that I'd like to reserve most of my time to questions. I think we learn more by questions than by me talking too much. I'm going to start by presenting the association. What is the Algerian American Association for Science, Technology, and Entrepreneurship? It's a U.S. non-profit membership-based organization funded by a group of us, Algerian Americans living and working in the U.S., funded in 2020, but we started working on it in 2019. And what is the purpose? The purpose is really to serve the needs of the scientific community, both in the US and Algeria through initiative and programs, and also to develop strong working relationships and partnership with academic institutions and business community in Algeria. And I think that's one reason that I think we have been invited to this conference today. Up to now, we have over 100 members all over the US. We are a virtual organization with no physical office, so all our members are spread out all over in the US. Brief about our mission, vision, and objective is vision to advance the role of science, technology, and entrepreneurship in Algeria through academic and professional initiatives. And how we do that? By mobilizing scientists, professional academic institutions, professional societies, and businesses to build a knowledge-based economy in Algeria, which I think it's a major goal of government. And also to contribute to the creation of this knowledge-based economy and with the advancement of science, technology, higher education, and research. Brief information about our board members. They're all listed here. And we have university professors, professionals, engineers, technologists. So all spread out in the US. More on the board members and how we are organized. we are organized right now on 3 working groups. One dealing with science, one dealing with technology, and one dealing with entrepreneurship and business group, which I lead. In addition to that, we have another committee covering scholarships and student initiative. Okay. Now, what can the American Association for Science and Technology do for advanced technology startups in the US? I think the association can be linked between Algeria and the US and help the advanced technology startups by providing information about training programs and funding opportunities, and also guiding and assisting the advanced technology startups when they apply for US trainings, incubators, and accelerators. We really encourage them a lot to do, because I listened to some presentations yesterday, and all of these startups had a goal to really go international, do business overseas. And we believe that one way to do it and get proper training is really to be part of this system. Now, in specific, is a proposal that I want to talk about today is how to build high-impact mentoring program. These ideas I'm sharing mostly is for incubators manager, and also can be used for a train-the-trainer program. The first thing in my mind is to set a goal. We have to find out exactly what do you want to do when you want to set the mentoring program, and also to define your mentor's needs and audience. Different audience needs different have different needs, so we have to be very careful there, and also select the right format and mentoring system, and one big issue here is really to learn how to recruit. I will go in details in further slides about the recruitment process, and also to understand the mentor outreach approach. Next is how do we want the mentoring program to be successful, and if you want the mentoring program to be successful, it needs to fit certain criteria. One is to fit the needs of the program. It has to be promoted, and also it needs an effective mentor recruitment as well as training. These are very important. Now, when we recruit mentors, what do we have to look for? Mentors need to be good communicators. They need to know how to transfer knowledge. They need to lead the team and also understand the curriculum as well as the goal of the training program. Very, very important here. And specifically, they need to have industrial experience, specific skill, and if possible, technical expertise. Connections are very important because they bring a lot to the mentee with personal, industrial groups and specific companies, and if possible, some type of financial background in the startup, consulting, or funding. So when you are seeking or recruiting mentors, what are the benefits that you have to mention? Is one is giving back to society, and also that's creating ties with universities, since most of the incubators in Algeria are located at the universities. Also giving a chance to these mentors to be involved in new technology and possibly join the startup team at later stage. And that might also increase their personal network and also at the same time learning something from these startups or something new. So how do you find mentors? There is no easy solution. The best advice is to look everywhere. And specifically, economic development agencies, you have some people with some experience and expertise, and anybody who participate as a judge, panelist, or speakers in startup competitions, financial institutions, board members, advisor, investors, consulting groups. So it's wide range of sources where you can look for mentors, as well as trade organization, association, and alumni group, and also startup founders. I think that's the most important. If you can get startup founders involved, that is very crucial because they bring a lot of experience and expertise beneficial to the startups. Now, what are the expectations? I think this should be made very clear at the beginning. They have to commit. They have to understand the materials and methods. They have to be there, meet on a regular basis, and deliver. And also, they need to bring some kind of how to real experience and advice to the startup program. And also, they need to challenge the team and take initiative. Not there to just be there, but also check up the team sometimes. And also, take time to learn about a new tech, product, technology, and services, and provide some kind of input. Now you have put your mentoring program in place. You had some experience. It's time to evaluate and you start by tracking the program, measure the program, and assess the program to see if you need adjustments, you need changes, and if you are in the right directions. I am done. I have been very fast, I guess, but I am really looking for questions. I think that will be the best way to really end this presentation.
Thank you so much, Professor. So we will just check if there is some question. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions pour Professeur Bedroni?
Do you have any question for Professor Bedroni? Indeed, there are some questions, Professor. We will start with the first one, if you don't mind. Good morning, sir.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you. I'm Mr. Deni Ibrahim, a co-founder of Startup. I would like to ask a question, and then I have got a confirmation in your presentation. But I would like to ask you: does your program deal directly with academicians, or it is open for professional world, or for new entrepreneurs, or for startups?
Yes, this is a proposal. It has that we will be working with CRDP and Mark Tester to put it in practice. In my mind, it's going to be part of an overall program for incubator managers. It's only a small piece. I have been talking to incubators managers of the past years, some Algerian universities. And I think this program will be beneficial. They would benefit from it, but I think they need more than only this piece. They need more modules about management, marketing, funding, and so forth. And the goal that really the association is working for is really to build a robust entrepreneurial ecosystems by training not only incubators managers, but also train the trainers that will spread out the work all over Algeria.
Next question.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Mr. Bedoni. I have two questions. As you are about coaching and mentoring for advanced technologies startups, who are your partners in this initiative? And the second question, do you care about mentor-mentee matching? Suppose that our research institution, there are some researcher who wanted to be mentored. How do you match researcher here in Algeria with those in the US? Thank you.
Okay. The partner that we're working right now, we're working with the program headed by Mark, CLDP, and they're working for the U.S. Embassy on these proposals to see how we can put them in practice. With, I think, one of the questions that will come up later will be funding, how to fund this program. We know that the needs in Algeria are tremendous. I follow what's going on daily basis. And the association is really ready to help and bring expertise from Algerians living in the US as well from American experts in the area of entrepreneurship education. And that includes mentoring program as well, marketing, funding, and management of this incubator. So we are ready to partner with Algerian institutions, universities, incubators, but the key question that I raise again is how we can put this program together with proper funding. That's answering question one. As for question two, I believe that my personal experience is very difficult to really do any mentor-mentee relationship virtually. I think the physical presence is very vital. You need to build that connection, personal connections, so mentee and mentors can work efficiently. We can try it virtually. I don't think it would be that effective. That's my personal experience and point of view. Maybe I'm wrong, but for the time being, since we are really, restricted, COVID and travel and all of this logistics problem, maybe that's one way to do it. And but I suggest, and that's my recommendation, is really if we put this program together, it's having it at every single incubators in Algeria, entrepreneurship center, maison de l'entrepreneuriat, whatever structure is teaching entrepreneurship, and try to have these programs physically with mentors and mentee present. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. That's human perspective, and if it doesn't work, then maybe the mentee needs to find another mentors or vice versa. I mean, that's my my position.
Okay, thank you. A last question. C'est la dernière, hein, s'il vous plaît, parce qu'après on passera à la.
This is the last question. But before the question, an answer about what you question you ask. I would like to let you know that we have a structure. We'll mention them in our program, but I invite to startups to get in touch with the incubators attending with us today. I think I'm sure that there is no problem. There will not be any problem. You can talk to them. Thank you very much, Mr. Bedroni. I would like to come up with an information. I think that there are two types of incubators in Algeria. The first one, an incubator at the R&D centers and universities, and business incubator. When it comes to the university incubators and R&D centers, there is a public fund that is put in place. Our wish is to see a support and to be accompanied by an ecosystem for emerging and to have access to the entrepreneurship and creating startups. So we would like to be accompanied or in the support or the experience gained in United States to see how adaptable it is to the Algerian context. And thank you.
Yes, I mean, I'm sure that the association, as well as Mark, CLDP, Georgia Tech, and all of the participants here are really willing and ready to help build the Algerian ecosystem and build it in a robust manner. I am one of them, trying to really push that one, moving in that direction. And I think it can be done. We can bring American experience and expertise. I myself have a lot of connections with entrepreneurship centers, incubators. I have been working with them here in the West for the past few years, trying to inform them about the opportunities in Algeria. They are ready to share their experience and expertise. I can cite a few. Sure. Keith at Georgia Tech, he mentioned a pilot program. Then I have been working with the University of Central Florida for some type of programs in Algeria. I had worked in the past with University of Colorado at Boulder, University of California, San Diego. So we can bring all of these institutions to really help build the ecosystem in Algeria. The key question I have here is how to put it in practice and how to get funding. Most of the institutions in the US, they need money to put this program together, and then how we can really fund funds to really implement this kind of programs.
Thank you, Professor Bedrouni. So now we go ahead. Marc, c'est maintenant à vous.
Mark, you have the floor to talk about the program of Vista. We are listening to you, Mark.
We did Vista yesterday.
Salam alaikum, masal khair. Comme on l'a vu hier, il y a, en ce qui concerne Vista, il y a trois types de questions.
As we saw yesterday, there are three types of
La première question, c'est comment former les gens.
Vista. So the first question is how to formulate.
Non, pas formuler. Comment former les
How
gens
to
à avoir un dialogue,
form
les inventeurs,
people
en mettant en place la
to have
méthode.
dialogue.
La deuxième question, c'est quand il y a une masse d'informations, comment traiter cette information pour avoir ce qui est vraiment.
How to deal with this.
Et la troisième question, c'est définir des seuils appropriés. Donc, ce qu'on propose, c'est de mettre en place un programme pilote avec quelques participants, avec l'organisme que le CNESI va mentionner tout à l'heure, pour mettre ça en place, et on en verra plus de détails par la suite. Et on vous remercie de votre attention. Ce qu'on voudrait maintenant, c'est écouter. What we would like to do now is to listen to CNESI, to find out who would be the counterparts on the Algerian side for all the programs, and then we'd like to make a few closing comments. But before everything, we'd like to thank everyone who is present today in CNES for a remarkable work. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Mark. So you're right. We're going now just to present you maybe the Algerian part for the full program. So it's Mr. Professor Boubi who is going to explain you what we are going to do.
شكرا أستاذ الفقير. إذا أكرر شكري الأستاذ تاجتال على كل المجهودات التي قام بها وعلى المبادلات.
The exchanges and the words that we have exchanged, and thanks to which we could organize this conference. I believe that startups and advanced technologies need monitoring and follow-up globally, not only in Algeria, as you said earlier, and require the development of the methodologies, developed methodologies, especially in terms of marketing its product and also to face up to competitiveness. This main subject relates to the sustainability of those startups in advanced technology and how they could impose themselves to face up to competitiveness, finance-wise and technology-wise and so on and so forth in the international market. So I reiterate my thanks, and I seize the opportunity to extend my warm thanks to the CNAS staff and also the IT team that worked on the organization of this event. So thank you very much for their care. So actually the projects proposed were 4 pilot projects. The first pilot project relates to the creation of a solid core made up of experts on intellectual property for startups, and this is something very useful to give special characteristics and develop specific aspects for intellectual property in terms of advanced technology, and not to limit ourselves to the classical mechanisms relating to patents in other fields. This is the first program. The second program relates to the implementation of the creative management, the creative program Icor, which was expounded by Dr. Magrigon, who explained the program. And the third program relates to training and support by the Algerian American Association for Startups that Mr. Bedroni explained. And the fourth program is a program of training and support. These are for programs for training and support proposed by CLBT and USPTU, whom we thank very much. And the fourth program is relating to training and support in the field of VISTA methodology that was explained by Mr. Exton yesterday. So it was on the sidelines of the workshops. As you noticed in the agenda, there was an exchange of views and discussion between the various actors and stakeholders, and we culminated into the distribution and of these programs as follows. So the first program relating to the intellectual property of startups in the field of advanced technology, we proposed l'INAPI, which is the National Institute for Patents, and also the National Agency for the Copyrights and Neighbor Rights, LAMDA. The second project was proposed by a group. So this is just the proposal of DGSDT, and with 2 focal points that will monitor and follow up the work, which is CIRIST and CDTA. So the Center of Research in Advanced Technology, and I think that amongst the questions that were asked earlier is who is going to follow up or monitor the works. And we propose the CDTA and CIRIST, which is the IT Research Center. So the other program, which is proposed by the U.S. Center for Technology. So we propose the Algerian Venture, so which I'm going to define very quickly. It's a center for deepening and management and the promotion of the support structures for startups, and also the INPT, the National Agency for the Promotion and Development of the Cyber Parks or Technology Park. So those two bodies were proposed as part of this program, and the same applies to the fourth program, which is related to the Vista technology, so the Algerian venture with INPT as well, based on the fact that after discussion, we believed that those national institutions and support institutions will be in charge of developing and adopting these methodologies. And the most important thing is the exchange of experiences. As the lady said it earlier, the representative of the National Agency for Technological Parks, INPT. So, and the more we exchange our experiences, and the more development of startups, and we will take advantage of the experience of our friends from the United States of America, especially in the field of startups, because they are very known for the development of the startups and incubators in the United States of America. And in the end, as a last word, I'd like to thank all the stakeholders from the other side, all the employees of the ACLDP and USPTU who supported us and accompanied us in this work. And I think that this is a starting point. It's a beginning for projects, and we believe, and we are very happy and pleased with what we have achieved. And I think that the exchange of experience will be helpful for all the stakeholders who are colleagues in startups. So because startups is a community, is a harmonious community in the world, around the world, because everybody knows everybody. And I reiterate my thanks again to you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we will continue. I don't know whether Paula would like to have the floor with regard to the explanations of the various programs that were attributed to the structures. So Professor Dibi gave you. So is everything okay with you? So you don't have any problems, Paula, Mark?
After Paula speaks,
did you jot down everything that has been said?
Yes, but after Paula speaks, I'd like to say a few words to invite the embassy to join. But go ahead, Paula.
Yeah, so I just wanted to actually invite the embassy to say a few words. I'm just saying a few words in English because of what the interpretation is probably easier for me. But I would like to thank everyone for joining today. It's been really wonderful, and we are very much looking forward to collaborating with all the various Algerian institutions that have been identified, including API, ONDA, INPT, CTDA, and I think that there's really a great opportunity for us to accomplish something concrete. This has been from the very beginning when we were designing this program. The goal has always been to obviously encourage exchange and collaboration, as this was mentioned, but it's also been the goal also to accomplish something concrete in collaboration with our various colleagues, and it's been very wonderful to see all of the different institutions represented in the room, and to be able to see how rich the innovation ecosystem is with all the different startups that have joined us today. And I hope we can continue the discussion. We will continue to coordinate to see the best way to implement the pilot programs that have been presented today. And I wanted to thank you all. J'espère vraiment que la prochaine fois on sera tous ensemble. And I will like to invite my colleague Molly, who I know is here, to just say a few words. Thank you so much again, and I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Merci bien. À bientôt.
Bonsoir, merci Paula. Bonsoir tout le monde. Vous pouvez m'entendre? Oui, d'accord. OK, donc bonsoir mesdames et messieurs. Et encore, merci d'avoir pris le temps d'être avec nous pour cet atelier extraordinaire sur l'avancement des startups technologiques en Algérie. Encore, merci à CNES et au CLDP pour l'organisation de cet événement productif. J'ai eu le plaisir d'assister virtuellement plusieurs de ces sessions. Et je sais que vous avez couvert tellement des excellents documents et beaucoup des infos. J'espère que vous avez été aussi impressionnés que moi par cet événement. Et que lorsque vous partirez ce soir, ce sera avec une nouvelle expertise, un enthousiasme et une énergie pour ce que nous pouvons tous faire pour soutenir l'écosystème des startups en Algérie. Cette conférence a réaffirmé l'engagement des États-Unis à construire nos relations avec l'Algérie, y compris notre partenariat économique croissant. Nous resterons en contact étroit au fur et à mesure que les plans de ces programmes pilotes seront élaborés et nous espérons qu'il y aura de nombreuses autres opportunités de coopération. Je vous souhaite tous les meilleurs et vous remercie encore pour votre participation et vos contributions au développement de ce secteur critique de l'économie. Encore merci et bonne soirée à tous.
Merci infiniment et merci à vous. Merci pour tout ce que vous avez fait. Merci à CLDP, merci à l'ambassade qui n'a ménagé aucun effort pour que demain les choses se passent de cette manière. Aujourd'hui, c'est un premier pas important que nous faisons ensemble. On parle d'économie de la connaissance, on parle demain de start-up à technologie avancée. L'Algérie est un partenaire solide et on veut travailler aussi avec un partenaire solide comme les États-Unis qui sauront bien sûr évidemment nous partager le meilleur pour la réussite demain de notre économie future. Merci à vous. Donc je ne sais pas si on fait le débrief pour les ateliers du matin ou comment ça se passe? Oui. Non, il n'y a plus d'intervention. Donc c'était juste pour vous dire donc, que nous avons fait ce matin 3 ateliers, donc un qui concernait bien sûr évidemment la partie juridique, la partie accompagnement et la partie propriété intellectuelle, sur lesquels donc, nous avons essayé de débattre, donc juste pour vous expliquer, donc afin de pouvoir voir les choses positives et négatives qui existent aujourd'hui dans notre recueil juridique et qui pourrait plus favoriser en fait cet écosystème qui aujourd'hui attend de se déclore au plus rapidement possible. Donc bon, nous allons, je pense, transmettre ces informations dans le temps. On va pas vous bloquer plus. Donc, ce que je voulais savoir, c'est si demain, en fait, si il y a que ce soit Paula ou Marc, vous ayez d'autres commentaires ou si tout est bon pour vous, on se retrouvera par la suite. Voilà, pour la suite des événements. Je vais donner déjà tout de suite la parole à professeur Bedroni qui a demandé de s'exprimer juste avant de nous quitter. Donc, professeur, commencez, puis on verra avec Marc qui a été l'un des piliers de cet événement avec nous, donc de donner aussi son avis avant de nous quitter. Merci. On ne vous entend pas, c'est Bedroni. Il faut peut-être...
All right, thanks. Yeah. Just following up on the contact part, do you want everything to go through CLDP, or do you want like the future contact are established directly with the institutions that Professor DB listed? And then, if in that case, concerning my association, the American Algerian Association for Science, Technology, and Entrepreneurship, I would like to have the name and contact information of my counterparts.
Professor Bedroni, no problem about the contact. You will have a direct contact with CNIS. Mr. Deby, Professor Deby will be maybe your focal point. So we will give you after all information, contact, and email just to exchange. Okay? Thank you. Thanks a lot, Professor Bedroni. Mark, I think that right now we have the Vice President of the Council. If you want to say something, she's here. Okay, sorry. She's coming. So we. Okay. Okay. Yes. Yes. The Vice President of the Council want to share with you some words about this event. So she will be in maybe 5 minutes here. So if you have time, if we can wait 5 minutes, she can give you maybe all information about the next step of this event.
Si je peux te faire quelques remarques pendant qu'on attend.
If I could make some comments on the time being.
I mean, I can speak in English, mais si je parle en français, ne traduisez pas, s'il vous plaît. Madame Molly comprend très très bien. Donc, on voudrait...
Traduisez plus.
Should I speak in English or should I speak in French?
Ah bon, on leur a demandé d'arrêter de traduire, donc parlez en français, Marc.
D'abord, comme l'a dit Maître Zalezinski, qui est le responsable de la CLDP de programme au Maghreb, on voudrait remercier tous les participants, tous les organisateurs, monsieur le professeur Deby qui a joué un rôle essentiel, qui n'a pas dormi à notre avis, depuis 2 semaines. Donc merci infiniment pour tout ce que vous avez fait. Et bien sûr, Sifarid Lefkir qui était un pilier fondamental de ce programme. La question maintenant, comme vous l'avez dit, c'est qu'au-delà des mots, qu'il y ait des actions concrètes. Et donc la semaine prochaine, le CLDP va dialoguer avec l'ambassade des États-Unis, sans laquelle cette manifestation n'aurait pas pu avoir lieu, pour mettre au point des prochaines étapes. Et à ce moment-là, une fois qu'on aura mis au point les prochaines étapes, on reviendrait vers le CNES pour proposer quelque chose. Alors, pour revenir à la question de M. Bedroni, il est fondamental que tous les programmes pilotes soient définis entre le CLDP et l'ambassade et ensuite le CNES, et que le point de contact fondamental demeure l'ambassade et CLDP pour qu'il y ait une bonne organisation. Donc, j'en reste là. Je voudrais remercier encore une fois tout le monde. Shukran jazilan. Et comme tout le monde l'a dit, Inch'Allah, la prochaine fois, tout le monde sera présent dans la même salle.
Merci beaucoup Marc, merci pour tous ces mots et puis ces encouragements. Comme vous l'avez dit, le programme est important, on va essayer évidemment de le construire intelligemment. Il y a plusieurs parties prenantes, donc nous allons nous aussi essayer de coopérer au maximum avec les différentes structures qui ont été retenues dans le cadre de ce programme avec les vis-à-vis américains, pour essayer de mettre à disposition un maximum de ressources qui pourraient profiter bien sûr de vos lumières et de vos connaissances et bien sûr tout en pensant, alors ce qu'on va vous demander, c'est un autre effort, c'est de penser aussi et de vous rapprocher peut-être à l'écosystème algérien que pour certains connaissent. Je pense que
I think that Professor Bedroni doesn't have any problems on this aspect. He could convey it when he does his coaching to his collaborators and colleagues that would be with him to moderate this event. For ICOPS, I think that we have a real project with them. It could be very interesting. I felt motivation from several people when they saw his presentation. Professor Magregon was really useful. He even sent us some messages via our platform asking us to reassure people that even if tomorrow on the ecosystem front, even if the ecosystem is weak, his method works. He is here to reassure us that tomorrow he doesn't wait for a mature ecosystem, but he is ready to support that with his methodology, and he could do it without any problems. To conclude, there's been a lot of exchange for the legal workshop. So it was, we had full houses. So it showed the interest granted by those people to our workshops. So Paula, Mark, and Professor Bedroni are on the program, and we are on questions that are very deep because many things have been done so far. And I'm very happy to see the excellence that exists around us in terms of skills, competency, and investment, because the state invested a lot on that. And we spoke about that with one of the managers of the RSET, who defined that investments are really important, and it's the same for the other incubators. Tremendous funds were allotted by the state. It's true that the state today invests in a material way, but we are investing on human resources, and this is the objective of this encounter, to give more skills and competency to the human resources, and that we could have a return on those elements and investment. So those were questions, discussion. We had a real brainstorming, and we took all the time to give the chance to everybody to give their point of view. It was active and interactive, and I could make a segregation of all those ideas to come up with recommendations. I would like to say that all the recommendations that were tabled will be structured. We have started to do a first structuring, as you can see today, and we will make a presentation of those recommendations, and it will be sent to the presidency, and the presidency that will study them and legislate on those. And I'm going to give the floor now. So go ahead. We will give the floor to Mrs. Yunus, or to Mrs. Hajrasi, sorry, so that she could read out the recommendations that we have retained based on the 3 workshops that we held. Good morning. I introduce myself, Mrs. Haj Qasim Meknes. We will give you an overview of the proceedings of the seminar, the workshops of the seminar, and the recommendations issued during the workshops held this morning. So I'd like to recall that we have organized 3 workshops. The first on the legal aspect, the second on the support aspect, and the third on the financing aspect. For the legal aspect, so let's say that the problematics and problems that we have noticed is the national legal framework doesn't allow the creation of startups for the benefit of researchers and students. So that was the first problem that we have noticed. So the second is the information on the ecosystem, which doesn't exist, or which is not sufficiently shared. In reality, the ministry in charge of startups and all the ministries involved have made a tremendous effort regarding the setting up of a favorable ecosystem for the benefit of startups, but unfortunately there is a certain insufficiency or lack in terms of information sharing. So the third observation is the legal framework related to startup and which is still not in force. So there's been recently work that has been done on the legal framework of the startups, and we will grant it the status or the status of a simplified joint stock company. So that text was studied but is not implemented yet, is not in force yet. This is the most favorable or the most favorable status, legal framework or legal status of a startup is a SARL. We have the innovative projects and incubators which are not clear and which accumulate some shortcomings in the ministry, and the Ministry of Startups is entirely aware of that, and there is a work of sensitization that is underway. There will be new tax laws. We have already started or set up an environment for the startups, and it will be developed on the short and medium and long run. We said to the startup holders or manager that they will benefit from fiscal advantages or incentives, but they can't find them. When they go to claim those, the concerned services or institutions say that unfortunately the tax laws are not implemented yet. And so the CNAS with the other structures, we are working closely in close collaboration to speed up the measures and promulgate all those tax laws. So we retain from the first aspect the review of the legal tax relating to startups, or relating to permanent researchers, so that we could integrate the clause that will allow them to create their own startups. There are works underway, notably the law on the research of higher education students, and we have tabled that to the CNAS. And the other is to have a legal arsenal so that we could facilitate the information sharing to the wider scale. And the third point is to set up mechanisms that guarantee the equality to access to public projects. So it's true that in the law we have 20% of the public markets that are allotted or devoted to startups. And to be able to guarantee the handling of their orders, so the companies focus more on bigger and larger companies than startups. We are going to see to it that those guarantees are implemented for the benefit of the startups. And the other point is to set up partnership mechanisms with the diaspora, especially with regard the exchange of experience and the technology transfer. That was about the first aspect. We move on now to the second workshop, which is the support. So we have raised the lack of coaching, especially in terms of business plans. In spite of the creation of several accelerators and incubators within universities throughout the national territory, without forgetting the private incubators, but we notice that the startup holders have difficulties in elaborating or in developing their business plans. We have the other observation, which is the lack of information on intellectual property in the field, notably of advanced technologies. Even if there is great work or tremendous work done by l'ANAP and Lambda and the international or the global office for intellectual property, there is an office created in Africa and particularly in Algeria, but there is still this lack and shortcoming which is observed within the startup holders in terms of advanced technology in particular. So the protection of their designs and their creations and inventions as well. So the third observation is the lack of a process of support or the lack of functional model or pattern, managerial pattern. We have some shortcomings or gaps to professionalism that should be brought to the support processes and also the procedures of support from A to Z, which is not sufficiently clarified, and this is due to the diversification of the fields in which the startups operate. We move on to the recommendations. The first is to value the pre-support phase ensured by CATI, the support centers and innovation and technology centers, which are implemented in all universities in Algeria. So they amount to 81 centers at universities, and sensitize them actually to the act of entrepreneurship. So things that should be learned at an early age and not wait until it's too late. So the third point is the domiciliation of the startups in the centers and local centers. It's also a shortcoming that is observed during the analysis of the text on the National Committee of Labels. We observe a lack of representation of the Ministry of Local Community, even though it is the cell that manages closely the problems of startup holders or to help them directly on a daily basis. And we have also the third recommendation, which is to give access to startups to use the scientific equipment which are available at the national level, notably those located in common services. As you may all know, the FNR, the National Fund for Development, Technology Development and Research, which is under the authority of the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, acquired at the national level technology, tools and elements, state-of-art technology that will serve to analyze and undertake all research works. And we would like to share this experience and this national heritage with our friends who have startups. And I hope that I draw your attention to the fact that there is Icor platform that exists, and we would like to reinforce it with other applications and mechanisms that bring together further the startup holders with this type of laboratories or services that we have. So the fourth point is to ensure the startup support during all their life cycles and create bridges between the startup holders and economic operators based on a win-win situation.
and put in place specific codes in the Register of Commerce with a mention of startups. As you know, that startups, especially in advanced technology, have different fields. So that's why we should think a way to make them more professional and to have a specific register of commerce. That was for the second workshop. The third one was about the finance. So the summary is the existence of there was some efforts about putting in place about ASF, Algerian Startup Funds, as specific mechanism for startups. Image of what beneficial for startups. So we find this mechanism that is specifically dedicated. This fund has been criticized, such as what was mentioned in the current account in the startup. So it is as a risk capital where the fund is completely associated with the startup. This is a double-edged weapon. It can be positive and for some startups that have some financial solvency, and for the others, they should prove themselves on the field. The second point is to give some privilege to the SAR or LTD status, and what is a difficulty for other forms. So waiting for another legal status. That's to say, SPAS is action, so company by shares. Modalities of exit modalities of SAF cannot be advantageous for startups. So the other point is the method of valorization of startups by fund, and also to focus on the heritage. The only criteria on which we ensure the assessment of the startup is the non-tangible heritage, and we generally provide or we use the patents, and that is huge work. And the third next point, the non-valorization of the active, non-tangible active, such as the patents that do not have Algerian legal permission. In spite of the fact that the value that given to the patent, we find that ISF and IFRS, that's to say the Algerian accounting system, does not valorize the non-tangible actives. There is another point, the non-sufficient orientation of private sector because of the risk of the specificities of startups. Here we find that the investment or the business industry does not or do not take the risk in Algeria. They do prefer to import them rather than to associate with startups, especially in the field of IT. We have also the current finance system does not cope with the startups that does not generate, especially in the first year, does not generate some gains or wins. The other workshop, we talked about accelerate the means of the put in place the crowdfunding and accelerate the access of startup to the stock exchange. The second one, improve the startups by integrating other points, improving the evaluation
rather than relying only on the heritage and include other criteria that should be taken into consideration.
En rapport avec les
Create the needs on the Algerian markets linked with the startups, for example, digitalization of the medical device. Here I would like to mention that we have to encourage the Algerian national ecosystem and absorb all what is now done by the startups, especially in the advanced technology. We have to take into consideration also another level of startups. The first level was from the creation of startups, so that we'll be using the negotiation. But after years, after some exercises, we should find complementary investment that ensure viability and complementarity of startups. And I would like to finish by the creation of some required mechanism that will enable the creation of startups.
Fonds national de la recherche.
As I mentioned, we have a National Fund of Scientific Research that finances the activities linked with the scientific research. And I would like to mention that the 5th chapter of finance the and here my suggestion why should not take advantage of this fund and the work of the researcher to finance some activities, not all of them in the beginning, but and funding them through a sale of startups that they have this Sweden and they have some patents and or an innovative project.
Prévoir et adopter un financement islamique au profit des startups.
There is another way of financing, which is Sharia compliance. Since Algeria adopt an Islamic system of funding, so the Islamic bank, why not integrating the startup in this system and providing them with mechanism, accurate and specific mechanism, and the presence of a representative of ISF at the banks to ensure the connection of with this new fund with the other funds that will ensure the financing of this fund. And I conclude with this point that is the problematic of in Algeria. We have made a huge efforts. We have a lot of text laws, but the problem is the Algerian individual is excellent, but in the collective work or group work is insufficient. So this is why we strongly recommend here as a National Council, Economic, Social, Environmental, we recommend group work and a synergy between all ministry department and private and public sector, citizens, and all categories. And we remain ready to help. And thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Nadia Ben Ali Fatma, Siti Amal, Derwish Amal, and Sharaf Radia. I would like to invite the Vice President, Madam Said Hasna Amina. And the Americans are still ready to hear you, madam. We give you the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, salam alaikum. Good afternoon. After these 2 days of thinking, I would like to close this seminar with some words to remind you about the commitment of our council about different topics that we talked. So first and foremost, on behalf of our council, the president of our council, would like to thank Madam the U.S. Embassy and Madam Mori Baubi, and we thank our partners and the speakers in Algeria and abroad, and those who shared their experience and idea in a very fruitful way. As you know, the topic is in the core part of the interest of government, and this is an important choice and imposed choice to the government to do the numeric and digital and technology transfer. And so we have a national conference with programming a workshop with startup and micro enterprise. We have got another meeting in March 2021 in about the knowledge and awareness about startups. So all that falls under the digital transformation that require different sector. Those startups provide appropriate solution to improve efficiency. So the economic boost should find new functioning model, especially to find more efficiency in different sector, either in transportation, energy, IT, and so on. So exchanges and ideas these 2 days that help provide solutions and new ideas, especially in the field of intellectual property, financing, support. We ensure you that the recommendation in this workshop will be examined and taken into consideration in the future in training and finding more researcher and people in the field, and we will work with you special, but all the questions will be analyzed with more interest to find a final form that will be submitted to the government. As there is also, I would like also to tell you that the CNAS has a role of a counselor or advisor at the government. So there is a set of activities that have been undertaken to ensure that all the recommendations that are the fruits of different seminars and meetings we organized so far. So to finalize, to conclude, I think it is important to underscore that in our Knesset HQ, we have followed live on Facebook, even if we couldn't achieve, but we have been following on live on our Facebook page, and the set of all the presentation will be provided and shared, broadcasted on our YouTube channel to ensure that the maximum number of internet users can watch them and see them. Once again, I would like to thank again every single person that have to develop new topics, the new ideas, and I hail the importance and the means that has the Ministry of Higher Research and in the research centers. This is very important that this is steps from the ministry. It is engaged, but even if still in limited level, we have some structures that enable that help to train students and provide the means to put in practice their ideas. So there is a number here. We should just add other ideas, and the field of competition will be enlarged. Once again, I renew my thanks on my behalf and on behalf of the President of the Economic Social National Council. And thank you very much, and good luck of what you are doing. And thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam the Vice President. And we carry on. And I repeat that this seminar will not finish this end of the day. So the relationship will be long and sustainable in the United States, because we have launched 4 programs. We have presented them and we have talked about them. So as I said, everybody will participate in a way or another. So that you will be informed by your structures, or you will be a stakeholder of this training. So please do not hesitate to get in touch, to keep in touch with the Knesset, because we have bridge and we have a page on our portal. So please contact us if you don't understand something, or if you want to use in anything. So all the means are provided, and if we should improve our objective or modify them to make Algeria a strong country and produce service provider in Algeria and abroad. Thank you very much for your attention, for availability, and see you soon. Thank you.
Recording has stopped.